Juliet, the newly appointed sheriff, is wanted by nobody living for the position and didn't want it herself. Can she gain an ally to help her bring peace before society collapses, and more importantly, to help her find the truth? Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark and I are discussing the fourth episode of the thrilling science fiction series Silo, so spoilers ahead. And if you're looking for an ally, just be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications, and we will be by your side. And with that, obviously, we've got to start off with
Gotta start
today's
with the
mug.
Don't talk to me until I reach the down deep of this mug. Oh my goodness.
I figure that's like the classic coffee thing. Like, don't talk to me until I've gotten my coffee, but
Right. Don't wait till I get to the down deep, which we found
wait until I.
out that
Yeah?
in this episode there is a way that the top views the down deep. Like the way that she kind of makes a snide comment to Juliet when she first gets there about like, I don't know what you people eat down there.
Right. That's crazy that there's like that much distance between them that there can actually be these kind of like misunderstandings about who they are and what they're like, and that somebody else made a comment to Juliet about her somebody from there rising up gave them hope, you know, where like that feels like an everyman story. It's not one of the people from like the mids or the top that got this position. Like it's somebody from the bottom, so it
Right.
it does sound kind of like they are looked down on, which is funny because when you hear Walker talk about, how important these roles are, that people can die if you screw up in these roles, in
Right.
the down deep. So it's just kind of interesting that like they look at themselves as like, look, we're not the ones who fight, about politics. Like our job is to keep people alive. I think Knox said that at one point, or somebody said that in like a previous episode.
Yes.
Now we're seeing Walker talk about like, look, you've got to be born into this because you have to be doing it your whole life, because if you make a mistake, lives will be lost. Like that's crazy that they look at themselves that way, and then the people above are like, what?
Well,
Who are these mole people?
right. Who are these people? These down deepers, if you will.
Right.
Wait, but I do feel like those last couple episodes really showed that Juliet filled that role. Like she couldn't even leave the main engine because she is so worried about keeping the lights on, keeping everybody alive. So I do think they did a great job of showing that for Juliet's character. Walker, though, I do have a question about Walker while we're on the
Okay,
subject
yeah,
of Walker. Do
sure,
you
sure,
think
sure.
do you think Walker is this like high up level person of the down deep? Like she's almost the in charge of it?
Hmm.
And what makes me
I mean,
think this is she knows everybody. She knew Juliet's mom, she knew Mayor John's, and
right.
she seems like she's in this lead role of like she was the one that took Juliet in. So I think she might be like the top of the down deep.
You know, I'm gonna be a nerd here and say that knowledge is power, and I think that because she has a radio and because she's good at fixing things and she has all these connections, I think that she has all this knowledge, which kind of gives her wisdom, which makes people look up to her, because it certainly doesn't feel like it is an official position that she
Right,
has.
right.
She seems like it seems like her thing is tinkering, not even necessarily like a maybe she's a professional fixer upper, but it seems very unofficial what she does, and that everybody maybe looks to her because of her connections, knowledge, and her wisdom.
Okay. That
Because
that makes
knowledge is
sense.
power.
Knowledge is power.
Read, go to school, do all that good stuff. That's
The more you know.
you,
Cue that
you
logo.
cue that logo. Yeah, yeah. So that was kind of my take on it. But yeah, I
Okay.
agree with you. Like she seems She seems like people go to her, you know?
Right, like just with like the mayor going to her, asking her about Juliet, and like knowing her partner, and it does seem she just has a lot of connections. Like she knew Juliet's mom very well, like and said, "You are just
Right.
like your mother." So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we saw some other kind of world building-y things with this. Like one thing that I thought was interesting is our view on recycling has kind of expanded, and it seems like a pivotal piece of the silo.
yes, I first thought like that there was, like how they have a farm and they're producing things. I thought that there
Mhm.
was a way that they had were able to produce things, but it does seem like most of the stuff in the silo is just like recycling through everything. Like if somebody
Right?
dies, their stuff goes to recycle.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of hammers that are made. It's that you get a hammer when people, like when people no longer need a hammer, they recycle it, and then that puts more into the population that you can potentially get from recycling. It was wild to me, and it totally makes sense that if you don't need anything anymore, maybe you grow too old for it, maybe somebody passes, like that seems like it might be part of the pact. Like you can't hold on to that stuff.
Yeah.
You've got to put it back into the population.
That's how Juliet's dad
Um,
made it sound like that they had held on to their family's stuff for too long.
right. And that's even how like Sims and Marnes made it seem when they were disagreeing on something, and Sims said, "But we all want the good of the silo," and then
For
they
the good of
like
the silo.
cheers for the good of the silo. Like it definitely seems like people understand that we can only work in cooperation.
Yes.
There has to be this shared agreement in order
Yes.
for us to survive. That life is fragile down here.
Which also I also feel like that also leads credence to them being important to the silo. Like everybody is
Yes.
important to the silo, and we need everybody, and we need everything, and like
Hmm.
all of it is working in tandem to keep this silo going.
Right. And even when you die, I think you're important to the silo because there were a couple things said when Marnes was trying to meet up with the woman who had died, and he didn't know that. And he ended
Mm-hmm.
up, he was talking to her husband. He said, she is in the soil,
Yes.
not she's in the ground. And then Marnes made a comment about, like he knew she was headed to the farm once she met him or something like that, which to me says like you don't bury people in boxes where they can't decompose and get their nutrients back in. Like it it needs to be buried in the soil where we're growing things
Yeah.
to put those. So I don't think this is like Soylent Green situation where it's like, they're eating people. But
Right.
I
Oh,
do think that the nutrients need to go back into the ground so that it goes back into the ecosystem. So it's like people are also recycled.
right. And it's funny you say that. So when they're first talking about Mayor John's burial, she says like, "Oh, you have to do the ceremonial burial," and this was before he goes down to Patrick. And I
Yeah,
even thought that that was a weird statement. I was like, "Where are they burying Mayor Johns? Like, where would like do they take her outside and bury her? That doesn't make sense. Nobody goes outside.
right.
Like, it
Yeah, you
doesn't seem
can't last
like
long outside, or at least they make it seem like you can't last long outside.
right, and it doesn't seem like at the bottom there's any dirt down there. And then I connected similar dots of the soil with talking to Deputy
With that one.
Marnes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of it's interesting because like to me recycling didn't seem like a big part of this, but now it seems like such a cornerstone.
Another thing I want to talk about this world building with something I think that you hit on in the last episode. What we
Okay.
saw. So you talked about, I think it was called the syndrome,
Yes.
and it seems to
Yes.
me that Juliet's brother and mother maybe succumb to this, because we saw briefly in the beginning that the brother was sick with something, had similar symptoms to maybe what you read out, and they even asked like,
Yeah,
what are our names, do you remember us? And so
right.
I think we got our first glimpse of it.
And I think 100% there's going to be more of the syndrome. I think that was because I think that most people don't even know that the syndrome is a thing. Like it was pretty tough for me to read that sign and involve like pausing and eventually going to Reddit to read all the words. So I think that this is something that they like laid down some clues for, and now this is like our first real taste of it. I think this could have a major part in maybe the truth of the silo. Like maybe people were put down here. Oh, I'm just going to throw this out here
All
and
right,
kind of like
throw it.
piggyback on something
Okay.
else that you mentioned, which is like, what if there are multiple silos?
Yes.
What if part of this is like to prevent the spread? Like, what if, if shit hits the fan and the syndrome goes wild in a population in the silo, you lose one silo. You don't lose
Lose.
the entire like if there are multiple silos, them being isolated might would stop it from spreading to another silo, you know?
Makes me have so many questions about this syndrome. Like, if Juliet's parent or mom and brother died from this, is it something that's contagious? Is it something that's airborne? How do they get
Right?
this?
Like how did yes.
And also made me start questioning like the silo in general, right? Like, if you think about like how the silo was built, like that wasn't built in a day. All this cement buildings and the staircase,
Right.
like, so this had to be like a plan of something, and if there was like like a toxicity outside, how were they able to like build the infrastructure of the silo, like, and be prepared for whatever the syndrome is?
Right. I don't know. It this definitely feels like to me a slow burn of a show.
Yeah.
You know, the scope was so small in the beginning. I had no clue that it would start to like change characters and kind of expand in what is like what's going on. But I'm digging it. Like it's just like pulling like at a thread at a time and just enough to have me a little intrigued, and now it's gotten to the point where it's like enough threads have been pulled that my interest is really peaked.
And I'm also like just curious, like, who knows about everything? Like, does everybody in the silo, are they all ignorant to this and there's somebody outside controlling strings? Or like, are people like Judge Meadows, who we still haven't met, and
Yeah,
Judicial, like, do they know? Like, does Sims know like that,
right.
what the thing is? Does he know about that, or is he just like for the silo?
I think he's for the side. I think there are very few people that there may be like one or two people that know everything.
Okay.
And that might be one of those things that's like passed down with a position, you know?
Okay.
It's it's wild. Something else kind of world building related which that I think is kind of interesting, and I know I'm getting a little nerdy here with like language. So we saw the pact for the first time, right? Like she had to put her
Yes.
hand on the pact, and it was like a Bible, in
Right.
thickness and
Yep.
size, which kind of surprised me. I thought it would be more like like the Declaration of Independence or some, like
Yeah.
something
A
like
piece
that.
of paper.
Right. This is pretty serious. And somebody else said something like, I don't know, praise the founders or something
Thank the
like that.
founders.
Thank the founders, yes, which eh, is not quite like religion level, but also kind of. But what I thought was interesting is the actual choice of the word pact, which is an agreement between parties. It seems a little less official slash and more like tentative than like laws. Like that to me, and that kind of reflects the silo where it feels like there's such a small thread between chaos and and peace, or between some terrible thing like the engine busting. Like it seems like they're hanging on by a thread, and that anything could bring them down, including the fact that like this is more of an agreement between parties than like hard laws.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
No, it does. Because, like, if you think, it does seem that, like, everything that they've talked about has always been, like, this could be the thing that sets off a rebellion. Like, we can't say that Mayor Johns was murdered because people might start thinking, oh, something's afoot. We can't send Juliet back down to Mechanical without trying to be sheriff because it'll make Mechanical rise up. Like, there was all these things that seem like the pact feels fragile.
It does. Which is funny because, and I don't want to get too political, but that also sometimes democracy can feel that fragile. Like sometimes it feels like a bedrock, and sometimes it feels like something that, it wouldn't take much for it to get lost, and like you really have to work hard to keep it all together.
It's a house of cards, baby.
Right. So similar to that with like choice of words, when Juliet was talking with Bernard, as she's about to get sworn in, and she's like, it's funny that you're doing this because you're the one who said I was stealing. And he's like, look, we got to put this stuff behind us. She said she appropriated the tape.
Right.
Which is like taking without consent, which is different from theft. And he didn't blink an eye, and he didn't say like, you're just using a different word for the same thing. It almost seemed like he accepted that, and maybe that was because of like the tough situation where it's like, look, let's not push things, I'm just going to let this go. But it does kind of make me wonder, similar to the pact, where it's like, this is an agreement about living together and doing things for the good of the silo, if appropriation is a valid excuse, where it's like, look, if you have a good enough of a reason, you can use something that's not yours.
Yeah.
Because it's for the good of the silo. Like, maybe nobody really owns anything.
Right.
If it's for the good of the silo, like, you could use something of somebody else's. You don't have to necessarily ask, as long as it's not for you.
Right. It's for the silo. The greater
for
good.
For the silo. Right.
I did take that when he, like, it seemed when she said that to him, to Bernard, he was like, you got me there. Okay, like, you didn't steal it. Like, right. it felt like, okay, you're good.
Right.
You get it. Sorry I accused you. But that's the impression I got from him from when she said that.
Yeah. And then, like, tiny minor thing, which I had asked about before, like, do people have to eat in cafeterias their whole lives? We saw our first kitchen scene, with her cooking, with Juliet cooking the eggs as a kid. We saw adult Juliet looking through her fridges. So
we
do have the ability
that she was going to stock the fridge for Holston, and that's why she doesn't know what the people in the Down Deep eat. We also heard there's a grab and go 3 levels down, so like a quick cafeteria. So there are different ways to get food. I do wonder if there's multiple cafeterias.
I think there has to be.
Because it did seem
because we saw a bunch of the Down Deep people in a cafeteria,
right?
And we didn't see any. I don't remember what is it up top, whatever it's referred to when you're like at the top.
Up top.
We didn't see any of those people in the cafeteria, and that was during Holston going outside, which is like a big event.
Yeah.
So like everybody would want the big screen.
Right.
To see that. So I 100% agree with you that there are multiple cafeterias, which also helps like create these smaller communities
Right.
where like, you know, it may not be, you may not have time to go to a cafeteria at a different level. So that like forces people to congregate within, certain areas. And considering it takes an entire day-ish to go from top to bottom, I would think that there's probably, I'm going to say more than three. I don't think it's just like top, mid, bottom cafeteria. I think there are a number of these. I don't know exactly how many, but that's my theory.
I would agree with that theory. I'm guessing maybe like one every 10 levels, 5 levels,
Yeah.
something like that.
What did you think of Deputy Marnes this episode? Because I did feel like this was kind of a change.
I mean, he's a man that just lost the love of his life. He is. I feel like he's a man with nothing to lose. He just lost Holston, who seemed like his best friend. He just lost Mayor Johns, who was his lover. Like, cute, intimate moment last episode where they,
Yeah.
they talk about she didn't just walk the silo to walk the silo. She wanted to spend time with him, and then he lost her. It was heartbreaking. And
It was.
I thought at one point we might lose him. Like, I thought he was gonna kill himself.
When he was building the punching bag,
Yeah.
I thought he was, yeah, that's where I went.
And
I went to a dark place.
right, and thinking about like how bad that is for the silo. To me, I was like, this is crazy
Right.
that he's just ready to do this, and then he's got so much anger and it. Okay, I have a question. Do you think the poisoning was targeted to him? Like he thinks it is. He thinks that he was the target. Or do you think that it was a target for the mayor?
It's really tough to say because like there are so many moving pieces going on. Like the mayor being out means that Bernard is mayor pro tems, which I feel kind of congregates power because now he has head of IT power and mayoral power,
Right.
which is a lot to be condensed. It's not like, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he had to step away from IT position in order to be mayor pro tems, but it does feel like power is being condensed, so that could be a motivation. The mayor showed that she wasn't somebody to bend to Judge Meadows,
Yep.
so maybe that's where it's coming from. Of like, Judge Meadows isn't getting what Judge Meadows wants, so they are doing this. So I can't quite tell if it's like an it's the mayor because it's anti-mayor or because somebody wants the power of the mayor, or I do think that there is some credence to it being the deputy for one reason or another.
Like they're trying to poison the deputy?
Yeah, I mean, now that there's an attack on the deputy, it's hard. Although that could be like a follow-up to the deputy not doing what Meadows wants, because
Right.
Sims did say like when Judge Meadows gets something in their craw.
That's all they focus on.
So
I
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
well, okay. So I do think it was an attack on the mayor over the deputy.
Okay.
I don't like
Okay.
I feel like we saw a little bit of red herrings, the deputy going to these past people that he had wronged, and like they gave him a whole list of all these things, and even one of the people that would be like a prime candidate was left off the list. Seems like that he got from
Right.
judicial, and judicial
Right.
seems to be, I mean, I feel like judicial has to be a lot of like the attack on Deputy Marnes. The guy is wearing all black, very judicial like.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling that judicial was trying to get Deputy Marnes out of there, or not Deputy Marnes, Mayor Johns.
Okay.
We talk about the water bottles, about like, when was the last time you walked the silo? You switched water bottles, but to me
Right.
it seems
It's easier for you to use somebody else's water bottle than your own. So it's like you always drink out of your buddy's pack and
right.
you don't drink your own.
Which it seems like Bernard didn't realize that. You know, he doesn't maybe travel
Yeah.
to Silo often, but it does.
Yeah.
I do think that Judicial would know that, and that's why the water bottle was empty, not because it had a leak in it, but because I mean, I don't know exactly why it would be empty, but it doesn't seem like they wanted to kill Marnes, but they wanted to kill the mayor.
Interesting. That is, it's tough to figure out like all of these kind of moving parts. I did think that, you know, Marnes at this point kind of reminds me a little bit of Holston, in which like he is very hard-headed, and so he has a very narrow focus and doesn't listen to the people around him, including the people he loves. So Holston didn't listen to his wife
Right.
when she told him point blank things. He still was like, "Oh, let me trust the doctor. Let me trust this person," you know.
Yes.
And it feels the kind of the same way with Marnes, where the love of his life, like the mayor who he loved, said, "I choose Juliet," and he's not being completely trustful yet of her. You know,
Yes.
he says, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is your first day on the job. There is nothing you can tell me. So this is
What are you gonna help on this?
You know? So it just kind of interesting, this thing of like men that don't listen to smart women in their life. And not that the men aren't smart,
Right.
but you know, like who are just very kind of narrow focused, and it takes a while before they finally are like, "Oh, I heard that like a month or a year ago." And now that I'm thinking about it, I understand what they were saying.
Right. I do like, though, how we see Marnes not... Like, I like how we saw Marnes and Juliet's relationship evolve in this episode. So, at first, he's very distrusting of her. He's, "Why are you here? You can't help. What did you tell Holston? Like, what made you... Like, what did you do to make him want to go outside?"
He made it seem like she mentally poisoned him. You know, like, what things did you do to, like, mess with his brain?
Yeah. And then seeing them talk about it, and then Juliet confides in him about where she's at, what she's looking for, and what Holston does. Yeah. And it does seem that, like, by the walkie-talkie conversation, when she starts raiding down to Walker, she's like, you know, "I think I might have found an ally," and he heard that, and I feel like now he's like, okay, maybe I can trust Juliet, and maybe I'm excited to see their little friendship blossom if he's not dead from Judicial.
And speaking of relationships, I really liked the relationship with him and Robert Sims.
Yes.
You know, like to see, because Judicial seems so scary.
Right.
But then Robert Sims seems so... He is intimidating, but he's not scary. If that makes sense, like
100%.
And it seems like one of those things where it's like intimidating from the outside, but like when you've got that relationship, like he walked in, he didn't ask to be invited in, and
he knocked.
Marnes didn't seem. But like when Marnes opened the door.
Oh, right.
Like, "May I come in?" You know, like
right.
He came in. He helped himself to a beer. Marnes wasn't like, "That's mine," you know? Like, to me, there was definite, you know, connection there.
It was
and
a
it
bit
seemed
of a
like
rapport.
one of those kind of... Yeah, like, one of those relationships where it's like you respect the person, you don't always agree with them. Maybe you've grown apart, and maybe there are
Yes.
like big differences between, but in the end, you do respect each other, even if you disagree with
Right.
big things.
I almost kind of think that Sims might be a good guy.
I think he is. I think
Honestly, everything that we've seen of him with the offering of the cake, where he seemed, and this is perfect to your point,
yeah,
he seemed so intimidating, but he was just like,
right,
I just want to be a nice, friendly gesture, and then he starts eating it, like, to show that it wasn't poison.
right. Like, and that's wild that like you can be such an intimidating figure that you bringing a cake to somebody seems like it might be aggressive. You know,
Right,
like
right.
that's
But yeah, when watching that scene with him and Marnes, I definitely like it didn't Marnes wasn't hostile to him like you were saying. So I do feel like
yeah.
and we saw his relationship with his daughter. I do think Sims is going to be a good guy that is maybe
I
teased to be the bad guy.
I think so. You mentioned earlier that you like you're excited to see how Juliet and Marnes' relationship goes on if Marnes is still alive.
Hopefully.
I would say that like one of the things that the show has gotten right is how they make us question whether or not things are real or not. Like I think that they are doing a good job of keeping things from us, but then also like actually killing people off, but in a way you don't necessarily expect. Like, so here's kind of what I mean by this, of how they're doing a good job of keeping the suspense. So Holston and Allison, like we see
Yeah.
Allison go outside, and we have reason to believe that the outside thing is a lie. So it's like maybe she's alive. And then in the next episode, when we kind of see a little bit more of Holston going outside, we still have reason to believe that there's a lie, but we also have reason to believe that they may both be dead. And then and then when we see the judge getting poisoned, as soon as the episode ended without like us getting a hard answer, and I said this in our episode, it's like you're not dead until we know you're dead. So
Yes.
to me, she wasn't dead because like why would they do that and not show it?
Right.
And then instantly this episode gave us that answer. It's like she's dead.
She's dead.
And that really surprised me. Like we've killed off a major character and we did it had the is she dead, is she not dead at the end of an episode, and it totally wasn't just like a cheap trick to get us to watch the next episode. She actually is dead,
Yeah.
which then raises the stakes of this episode where it's like, is Marnes dead or not? I legitimately don't know. At
I
this point, like
have no
they're
idea.
they're not just yeah, like they're really keeping the suspense up and like doing these interesting tricks to like keep us not knowing.
I mean, so far, every episode, a main character dies. Because it's like, Allison, I feel like, was the main character of that episode. She dies. Holston dies. Mayor Johns was pretty much the one going down the silo, meeting the people in the
Right.
maze. She dies. This episode was about Marnes. Like, we really focused a lot on Marnes. And he's got a shotgun pointed in his face.
My thought is there probably aren't a lot of bullets, and I think that Marnes has a shotgun, but I don't think he necessarily has the bullets for it.
Well, he does have the bullets for it.
Oh, he does?
We saw in the kitchen when Juliet's taking care of his nose, he has the shells on
Okay.
there. But I do think that you're correct. I don't think the
But there may
shotgun
not be
is
many, so it's not loaded.
correct. And that's why at first when he holds the shotgun at him the first time, he like grabs it from him cuz I think he knows there's no bullets in there.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I don't know what his plan is now, and I don't know who that guy is. I'm assuming he's from Judicial. That's my thought.
And we saw his face, so even if he escapes,
We know.
We know.
And I'm wondering if that's the guy that's supposed to be the next sheriff.
Because we haven't met him.
We haven't met him. And the reason we see this guy's face makes me think that he's going to be... I can't remember the next sheriff's name that they want, but I think that's him.
Interesting. I did want to briefly circle back to how Marnes was during this episode. And like you said that he was lashing out because of all of the stuff that's going on. I do think that there are some truths to who you are when you are under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if this is just Marnes when he is under the worst situation. That I do think that he might at times be an aggressive deputy, and kind of something that gave me a little bit of clue to that was when he was meeting with the guy whose wife was dead. That guy accused Marnes of his, I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically false accusation
of a relic
was what led to her being dead. So it's he potentially, and I'm sure they have limited resources, so it's I'm sure, but it definitely seemed like the guy was saying my wife was innocent and it was you that put her under. So I don't think he's dirty.
So,
but I do think that he might sometimes be too hard.
So the way I took that whole scene was that this was my theory of how to interpret that scene. It seemed like yes, he did something to get her busted for something, and that led to her down spiral that inevitably killed her. What I'm kind of thinking, I do feel like Deputy Marnes seems very truthful in the law, and I'm thinking that maybe somebody from Judicial planted something there, and Marnes just doing the job that he's supposed to do, and even though she was still guilty of the crime because it was the fake whatever, Patrick knows that it wasn't, she didn't have those things, and then Deputy Marnes is just going through the motions, and I do believe Judicial set that up. But I do feel like we see that Marnes has really given up on following the law, and the way they show that is with the bottle. I feel like where it says don't hang anything over the edge, and he's just fuck you.
Right. That's one of the funniest ways to act out, where it's nobody's watching, what are the stakes of what you are doing?
Yes.
I mean, potentially with the distance and the drop, somebody from the deep down would probably die if they were under it,
Oh yeah.
But yeah. Let's chat about Juliet.
Alrighty.
So, I think it was interesting getting more of her backstory in this episode. And we've already touched a little bit on that, but I do think that there are some interesting kind of threads on that.
Okay.
So, you mentioned the syndrome. So, I think to me it's clear that the brother got the syndrome.
Yes.
I'm not certain that the mom got it, but I also kind of think that might just be because we have more backstory to do.
Yes.
So we can see more of that. Because it does feel like she probably did. That was my assumption, but they definitely didn't show it.
I do think that if the mom didn't die from the syndrome, I could see her killing herself. because of that. And I can't remember now, and I didn't even look. Did the young Juliet have any marks by the time she went down to mechanical?
Ooh.
Because I don't think I saw anything. Like when she's yelling at her dad in mechanical, I don't remember seeing any marks on her neck. But the marks are very prominent in this episode, so I'm wondering what causes those.
What? I actually completely forgot about that, even though I'd kind of mentioned those. That's interesting that they didn't show the mom, because once again, I assumed like she also got the syndrome, but that's a good point. Like, what if?
And then she did this heinous act, and that would make, like, to me, I feel like that would almost justify the way that her dad was acting, because like he is very upset by what happened, and if two people died from the syndrome back to back, it would seem that like it would be very painful and unfortunate, but you could almost like reconcile with that easier. But because he is so like, he's so distant from it, like I think he feels betrayed by his wife, that she would just, she has another child, why would she end her life? I'm speculating wildly, of course. I don't know if that's true, but
So going back to her mom and something you said earlier, and I was holding off because I kind of wanted to talk about when I was talking about Juliet.
okay.
You mentioned that Walker knows everybody,
Yes.
and Walker knew Hannah. I don't know if that's necessarily because Walker knows everybody, and here's what I was thinking, what if Walker is from the Down Deep? And the reason I say that is because
Hannah's Juliet's mom.
Hannah's from the Down Deep.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because Walker says the reason you can't do this and other people can is because they were born into it.
Yes.
And she says,
so was I.
I am too. So was I.
Yes.
And she did say that she learned how to fix things from her mom.
Right.
And Walker knows her mom quite well. Like, this isn't just like over the radio knows her. Like, this is when she was seeing how defiant Juliet was being. She's like, you're like your mom.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well.
And then that also kind of raises questions about like, how did she get, if that is correct, and this is like a wild assumption, so then building questions and ideas off of assumptions can be dangerous. That's like building on a house of cards.
Right.
So let's just
silo.
Let's just like take that with a grain of salt. But if she does come from the deep down, and it doesn't seem like people rise up much, how did she end up in the mids? How did she end up marrying a doctor in the mids? Because that seems like it seems like being a doctor is already kind of a level, because I assume they have to have doctors on every level, just like they have to have cafeterias on every level. So it seems like being a doctor is already a leg up on your level. So it's like, was there love there? Was it an arranged marriage for some reason? He doesn't seem like the most loving guy. He seems like he is married to his work.
Well, I do wonder if he's married to his work because he lost his wife and son. Like, it doesn't seem like
he seemed married to it before, because like he maybe that was afterward. That was after he lost them. I was thinking like he's away all the time, and she's like she has to bring the stuff to recycling, which is so messed up.
So I wonder, okay, here comes, I see this house of cards, right? It's very unstable. Let me see if I can put some more things on this. Okay.
Just one more.
Let's go down this rabbit hole. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
We see the sign for the syndrome in the Down Deep.
Yeah.
Haven't seen it anywhere in the mids. Haven't seen it up top. We do know that the Down Deep is more connected to the outside. There's water. There's, places they can go outside-ish, maybe. There's like a whole tunnel to go where the other digger was. So what if the syndrome is a rare disease that occurs mostly to people of the Down Deep? And Juliet's mom gets out of the Down Deep and goes up and marries someone from the Mids, and then her son has the syndrome because she was maybe a carrier of this Down Deep disease that affected her son, and she blamed herself. That's why she killed herself. That's why the dad said. That's why Juliet went to mechanical. Now she's a sheriff.
It's wild. I want to learn more about this world. I want to get to the next episode. I'm very, very, very interested. It did kind of remind me of like when Sheriff Holston was originally asking Juliet, why about her relationship with, sorry, I can't remember his name, but the one who, George Wilkins.
George Wilkins.
Like the fact that it was unsanctioned, where it kind of makes it seem like maybe because of this, the pact and doing things for the good of the silo, that sometimes maybe relationships are forced for some reason. Sometimes relationships aren't allowed for some reason. That oftentimes things are about the good of the silo and not necessarily, individuals. And that's why maybe they chose to do that kind of like off the books, because if they got turned down, there's probably no like chance to do a follow-up and like let's try this again,
right?
And maybe like a one and done. If you're denied, no relationship.
Well, and it is interesting with this sanctioning of relationships, because it also does seem that both Marnes and Mayor Johns had feelings for each other, like that there was this unrequited love of them that never was sanctioned. And it, like, they could have got that sanctioned. Why not? Why, if they had these feelings for each other, he had it for her clearly, she clearly had it for him, and I don't think they just built it from the walk on the silo. Yeah. Why didn't they try to get it sanctioned?
Interesting.
And that mirrors a parallel of Juliet and Marnes going on an adventure of figuring out who killed their unsanctioned lovers.
Right. Ooh.
And I want to talk about Juliet's name.
Okay.
I want to talk about Juliet's name, and we'll get to him in a little bit, Lucas, but he says something to Juliet. Her name comes from a play, and that is not performed anymore. It's banned.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that is it banned or?
I think it is, and here's why.
Okay.
The ending, they kill themselves.
Ooh.
And suicide is frowned on in the pact.
Suicide is frowned upon, or is it also related to like unrequited love, and like sometimes you have to do things for the good of the silo and not just because like you really want to. Like I could see it being like a couple things that are very bad for this kind of society.
Right, like that whole story itself, the play is just it promotes suicide, which is against the pact. It promotes going against your family to have love, and like these unsanctioned loves that were like technically her and George could have been her and Romeo. But like
right.
And are we foreshadowing Juliet's inevitable death?
Ooh. That's interesting stuff. I like it.
Yeah, I got really excited when he said that, and he was like, his band, probably written by a rebel, and that's where my mind went.
Interesting. And with that, let's talk about Lucas.
Yes.
You already alluded to this, the fact that he knows... Well, you talked about the fact that, like, what is the meaning of her name? But to me, it was the fact he knows about it and like how he uses it is actually kind of interesting. Like that shows knowledge of something that, like, if they're not showing this play anymore, how does he necessarily know about it?
Right. And
You know?
he even makes a comment about it of saying like, "Oh, did I just say something that could get me arrested?"
It did seem like he was testing the boundaries, because it did seem like that was a pretty light reference, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that that's something that would like get you in serious trouble,
Maybe a
but
day
it
in
just
holding.
kind of right versus like if he said that to somebody who is all about, the pact and like every single word in it, that if that person really followed that they might throw him in there for a day or something like that. But it's like a very simple way to test, like, how much do you pay it, like how much do you care about this stuff versus necessarily the truth.
Yes.
Is it okay, like, pushing the lines? But then it also kind of leads to something else I mentioned of like knowledge is power. The fact that he has this information also means that maybe he has banned material, or maybe he's like, maybe there's not a lot of material because it's been burned. Maybe like people have passed this down orally, and he's one of the people that
Has it?
knows this from like oral tradition,
Oh.
where it, that the knowledge shouldn't be shared because it's banned, but it's being passed down orally,
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is something about Lucas, because both times we see him, he's just sitting in the at two different times. He's just sitting at the cafeteria, staring at the screen. And I think he's looking for the glitch in the screen. That's what I believe. I think he's trying to figure out the inconsistencies of what the monitors are showing him. Knowledge is power. He is
right?
The only power that he can take is by watching the screen as long as he can to figure out if what he's seeing is true. Because we saw the glitch that showed beautiful green skies.
Yeah.
So why is he sitting in there?
Right. Like, I, maybe he's looking for any kind of detail, and maybe an interesting detail he could find is that nothing ever moves, just like more grime accumulates, which, like, there's got to be wind out there, right? So it's like you should see branches move or something. Like, maybe he's observing for something like that, and notices like weird inconsistencies showing that it's like a generated image. I He clearly has some importance. I don't know how long that importance will last.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to see him in either the next episode or the episode after that.
Right.
It's tough to say with the show, because it's left Holston and Allison's fate just hanging for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Even though there's clearly inconsistencies, like, are they dead, and is the world out there the way that we're actually seeing on the screen? Like, that's just been left. So who knows when they'll come to this. This show is teasing things out in a very interesting pace that I'm not quite used to.
Yeah. It is really interesting with the outside is this like big mystery, and we're getting slight teases, but then there's this like inner mystery of the silo of like who's in charge, who's killing people, what's doing this, what's doing that, and it just feels like there's all these mysteries, and I'm excited about them. I want to know where they go.
I want to know.
And with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along with us. Next week we will be tackling Silo episode 5, So come back next Monday and we will be there. I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.